Welcome to the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man. Brought to you by Friend Entertainment USA, producing the best concerts for charities and corporations for over 30 years. And CBMS Consulting Services, control your business before it controls you. In association with Area 22 Productions, your multimedia streaming network. Now, here is Darren and the Music Man. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Business Power Hour with Darren and the Music Man. I'm Darren Sayafi. I'm your host for tonight. Norman's not with us tonight, unfortunately. He had a little bit of a setback last week. Norman is back in the hospital, but Norman, we wish you well. We're looking forward to having you back here as soon as you get better. You got to come back 100% there, buddy. I know you tried to get back a little bit sooner than you should have. Tonight, speaking of healthcare and making sure that we're taken care of when we need to take care of, we have a great guest. This gentleman, does those things and gives you the peace of mind that you need, knowing that as we get older, we're going to be taken care of. And our beneficiaries, for lack of a better word, are taken care of in the sense that we want them to be. So my guest tonight is from the law office of David R. Okrent, and it's David Okrent. David, welcome.
Thank you.
How are you this evening?
I'm good. Norman, if you're watching, shout out to you. I hope that you're feeling better. Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yes. Like I said, Norman goes 110 miles an hour. He came back a little bit too soon, but he's doing well. I know you spoke to him earlier today. Right. I've been speaking with him also, so we know he's a fighter, right? and he's doing everything he can with that.
That's great.
So let's talk about that, David. Tell me a little bit about your firm and what your firm does, and really, why you do what you do.
So my firm, we are an elder law estate planning special needs firm. We have the former director of Medicaid in Nassau County on staff. Mm-hmm. I'm a CPA, former IRS agent, have been practicing in the area for over 30 years. And we have a lot of staff with a lot of different depth. We do what we do because we love what we do.
Okay.
We bring harmony to an estate plan, and we help protect the fragile. We help people make sure they get the care they need, preserve whatever assets they can, and coordinate things as they age in place.
Okay, so you hear a lot about elder care these days, and we know there's a lot of things going on with the Supreme Court, and you and I had some discussions about that earlier, and Obamacare and all these other things. And as people are getting older, it's getting harder and harder for them to be taken care of.
Right.
So your firm really is there to make sure that all the right mechanisms are in place to ensure that we're taken care of as we get older.
Right.
Right.
Right. To help put things in place in advance of need, and then help coordinate care and financial resources at a time of need.
Okay. Now, and you're working a lot of times with these people that are already past the ages of preparation.
Nobody's past the age of preparation.
Okay,
but that's okay.
Okay, well, and that's a great point, right?
Yeah.
So we shouldn't sit, we shouldn't wait. We should say, hey, you know what? I should start planning now.
Right.
Right. Because one of the things that I preach in my business is preparation and planning and systems and having all of that. And we should think about that for our personal lives also. Is that we should have a roadmap of where we want to be when we retire.
Right.
And then what would happen if, it's the old if thing, right?
Right.
So let me ask you this. How did you get into elder care? You said before you were, and you and I had the discussion before the thing, you worked for Pete Warwick, right?
Right.
Okay, out of college. You worked for the IRS.
Right.
Then you went to law school.
Right.
Okay, and in our conversation, you said you wanted to be a tax attorney.
That was the primary motivation.
Right.
Then I had a couple of interviews with some tax law firms, because at that time I was an IRS agent coming out of law school, and I had a Monday morning interview with a gentleman who apologized for not being organized because the day before he took his birthday off.
Right.
And I said, I know this is a 400-man law firm, but it's not really where I want to be.
Right.
And so I stayed on the island and was fortunate enough to land in the elder law field, in an elder law firm, where I stayed for a little while, and then started my practice shortly after, because I had enough depth.
So you went into an elder law firm, and you kind of fell in love with the work.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah,
helping
absolutely.
people and making sure that, hey, you know what, it gave you that satisfaction that you were able to help people through the things.
Right.
What is the most common mistake that you find when you come across a client?
I think the most common is that they don't have any plan or any documents in place.
Nothing in place, no
Nothing in
will,
place.
nothing like
Right.
that, right?
I think that's the first most common.
Okay,
Yeah, that they failed to do any planning,
right,
which it kind of means they have a plan already, right?
Mhm.
And as the saying goes, they have really failed to plan,
right,
right? So their plan is to fail. And then I guess the next common mistake is that people have done planning, but haven't kept up with it.
right,
They haven't reviewed it periodically. Things go stale. The law changes on a regular basis. And right now, especially in the long-term care world, that changes every 6 seconds. We
Right.
just got when I say we, I mean the community, was just presented with a Supreme Court case, New York Supreme Court case, I think it was the second one from the Supreme Court, that changed how live-in aides get paid,
okay,
and overturned a Department of Labor ruling that was more favorable to person needing care, to now a person that's a live-in aide, instead of getting paid for 13 hours a day, has to get paid for, or might have to get paid for 24 hours a day.
wow.
Right.
So that's a huge jump in pay. How can people afford this?
I don't know that they'll be able to. The state's not going to be able to afford it, and if something isn't done to correct it, the likelihood is that care at home, if it's live-in care that's needed, won't be available.
Right, so, I mean, it goes back to, what everybody's screaming about is healthcare and the affordability of healthcare, and, and all of these rules that are coming out are just making it so hard for us to prepare properly.
And so that comes back to, the second most common failure is to put a plan in place but not monitor it, right?
Right,
And so by monitoring it, you can keep up with whatever is going on, like this ruling. Okay, so you have a long-term care plan in place, you are anticipating it to be X. Well, if you review everything on a yearly basis, you can be ahead of that curve and maybe adjust how you have done your planning, whatever
Right.
it might be.
so it really doesn't matter, and you and I had this discussion. A lot of people feel, well, I don't have anything, so why am I gonna go and do all of these plans and create all of these, create these wills and all this other things? What's the importance of having a will, regardless of how many assets you have?
That's a great question. And I enjoy the fact pattern, because the person that doesn't have anything still has themselves, right?
Right.
And so one of the primary things that we talk about with clients and help them decide and put in place are something called advanced directives, powers of attorney, healthcare proxies, living wills. Those documents are put in place so that financial decisions can be made. If
Right.
you don't have any finances, well, you might have insurance, or you might want to apply for government benefits. In order for somebody else to do that for you, they need a power of attorney.
Right,
For medical decisions, unless you want to leave it up to the court system, if you want somebody to make medical decisions for you and you can't, you should have a healthcare proxy. We do have a law in New York called the Family Healthcare Decision Act, which allows a committee of somebody institutionalized that's determined to be incapacitated to select a member off of a list to make decisions.
so basically, if you don't plan, New York State says, okay, we have a list of people.
You're turning control over to the state.
Right.
Or to somebody else.
Right, okay,
So it's all about controlling your future and
right.
your,
And you want to make
care.
sure that your wishes are carried out the way that you want,
right,
and not the way somebody who's never met you, right,
right.
will do
That's
it.
right.
Okay?
Yep.
What is most? That, you and I, we were talking before, and you said, well, I'll mention most, and I said, well, what is that?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a little
Okay,
bit.
we could probably spend a night on that, but
Okay.
the MOLST is a document put out by the Department of Health. It stands for Medical Order Life Sustaining Treatment.
Right.
It's a form that's completed with the patient and the doctor, and it talks about end of life.
Okay.
And it's the only document EMS follows. So if you present somebody from an ambulance with a healthcare proxy,
Right.
they're not going to follow it. They're not obligated to, and they're just not going to. If you present them with a MOLST, they have to follow that by law.
So the MOLST is like a DNR, right?
It's like a DNR.
Right.
It's
And
a
for
very
those of you,
sophisticated DNR.
DNRs do not revive. So if my wishes were, if I, say God forbid I had a disease that eventually my life was going to end, and I went into cardiac arrest or something like that, I may have a MOLST that says, if I go into cardiac arrest and I die, do not revive me.
Right,
Right? That's
Right.
what DNR stands for, do not revive.
right.
So, that would be my wishes, and that would go into a MOLST.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
So like a healthcare, let's talk about the difference between a healthcare proxy,
Okay,
all right, and a MOLST. So
Okay.
a MOLST is, if this happens, this is what I want followed.
right,
And by law, they have to follow it.
right.
A healthcare proxy is just what,
So the healthcare proxy names an agent
right?
and a successor.
Okay,
And in the document, you need to add language regarding artificial nutrition and hydration so that the person named can make life-sustaining decisions. But you're basically, in a healthcare proxy, designating somebody to make medical decisions for you when you're incapacitated and
Okay.
unable to make those decisions.
right,
Those decisions can range anywhere from who the doctor's going to be, where you're going to be residing.
right.
So it's a full range as compared to the MOLST, which is really just a DNR of sort.
Okay.
Yeah.
So but if I had a MOLST, right, and I was incapacitated, because now I'm getting like, okay, well, in my MOLST, can I kind of spell those things out where if I go into,
You can, but it's limited to those end-of-life treatments.
I got you.
It's not
Okay,
going
so,
to be, you're not going to be able to pick the nursing home with
Right.
a MOLST,
okay, so,
or the assisted living, or come back home.
right.
The MOLST is strictly the end-of-life.
Okay,
piece.
so the proxy is really me saying, I want my son or my daughter or, or whoever
Right,
to say, okay, if dad is now incapacitated, this is what he wants done, or this is where we're gonna put him
that's right.
and that type of thing. We're gonna tuck him in the closet and then
Yeah.
he won't bother
Well,
us
let's hope it's
anymore,
not in
right?
that closet.
Yeah.
I guess
And
it
we'll throw
depends on
some
the
food in
closet,
there
right?
every once in a while, right? Yeah. And then, we'll be able to do that. So it's important to have both then.
Absolutely.
It is, from what I can see,
So I had a colleague whose husband had heart surgery in a local hospital, came home and had an event at home.
right,
She wanted him to go back to that hospital. EMS showed up and said, no, that's not their hospital of direction.
right,
So they took him to another hospital and he died.
okay,
And she sued, knowledgeable elder law practitioner, and bringing a lawsuit that EMS should have followed her directions.
right,
And the Supreme Court held that, no, she was wrong. The healthcare proxy in the community doesn't
hold that,
hold that.
right, so,
And so subsequent to that, the MOLST came out and,
Right.
has become the very important document for
so
the community.
in the MOLST, I could say what hospital I want to go to?
No, again, the
I know,
MOLST is
yeah,
just a
direction,
direction. That's
okay.
just a
All right,
direction.
I just trying to,
Yeah.
make sure that everybody understands
And
that,
truthfully, the MOLST is something that's on the Department of Health website
right?
with instructions.
Mhm.
It's not a lawyer document. It's
So
something
wait a
that you can
second, you said
download.
it's legally binding though.
It is, but it doesn't have to be prepared and shouldn't be prepared by a lawyer.
Okay.
It's something that you prepare, that you download the form, you take it to your doctor, and you fill it out with your doctor. The lawyer could have a copy of it, but
Right,
it's not something that we prepare.
I got
We
you.
prepare healthcare proxies and living wills and HIPAA releases and things
Right.
of that nature.
Right. Okay. Let me ask you this, because this is something we talked about too. You make a will up, all right? And we talked about beneficiaries.
Right,
and you make a will up and you designated beneficiaries, is there a time where that will is not going to be followed?
So the will, right, another great question. The will only governs probate assets.
Okay. Which
So-
means?
Which means a probate asset is an asset in a person's name alone when they die. It has no direction.
Okay.
So if it's a life insurance policy that has a named beneficiary,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a probate asset.
Okay.
If it's an IRA with a named beneficiary, it's not a probate asset.
Okay.
If it's a TOD account, joint, tenants by the entirety,
Right.
joint with right of survivorship, it's not a probate asset. But if the person that died has life insurance with no beneficiary,
Right.
IRA with no beneficiary, or a bank account or real estate with no beneficiary,
Mm-hmm.
then that's a probate asset. And the
Gotcha.
will governs that.
I gotcha. So John, just make sure that she's not a beneficiary. John, my cousin John, is watching tonight.
Okay.
All right, he's not leaving his wife anything. So as long as she's not a named beneficiary, John, she doesn't have to get anything.
Well,
So there you go, buddy. All
you
right.
just be careful because New York law kind of provides a little bit otherwise.
Well, he's in Jersey. So.
Oh, okay, so there you go.
But that's some of the questions that people have. So if somebody had a will, we talked about this before the show,
Yeah,
and I'm divorced, okay, and I did a will when I was married,
right,
but I never updated it.
right.
What happens to that will?
So technically, under New York law, once you get divorced, New York law automatically revises the will for you.
Okay.
But you really don't want to rely on that because New York law could change at any time.
Mm-hmm.
And there could be arguments made that even though you didn't change your will, you didn't change it because you intended it to stay that way.
Right.
And so if that argument is successful, now if your will left everything to your spouse, when you die, everything's going to go to the spouse,
Right.
which is contrary usually
To
to a divorce.
to a divorce,
Not always,
right.
but
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
right.
no, I gotcha. I
Yeah.
gotcha. So it's important to update your will in a timely fashion
And coordinate it with your beneficiaries.
and coordinate it with your benefits, because that was something that you brought up beforehand, that
Right.
even though, and this was a situation you had where you had somebody who had an asset that the beneficiaries were directed by a prior will that no
Right.
longer existed
Right,
because they updated the will,
right.
okay? So then that
Failed
went
to update the beneficiaries.
right. So that went into probate, right?
Right.
So because that was then deemed not
And then will left it to other people,
right,
then he really wanted it to be left to.
right.
So it's you have to, when you sit down and do a will, you got to make sure that you coordinate all of your assets with it.
So really need somebody like you to make sure that we cover all the bases and we
Yes.
don't forget anything.
Right.
Right? So we're not going to go online to some of these legal sites and just download a will and fill it out and say, okay, I'm done. Right? It's best to get somebody like you.
Right.
Right? And if I wanted to get a hold of you, David,
Right.
how would I do that?
So we have 3 offices. We have one in Huntington, we have one in Setauket, and we have one in West Hampton. My office can be reached at 631-427-4600. We welcome calls. The individual that will usually answer the call has been with me for over 18 years, and she does a great job. Everybody that calls is always complimentary about that she's very forthcoming with information, and they feel very good about speaking with her.
Because you're providing your clients not only just with that particular service, but you really care about your clients and what's going on with them,
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
You know, you're doing what's in the best interest for them. You're not a law firm where you just, okay, let's fill out the paperwork and let's move on to the next client.
Right. And so we've set things up in a way over the years to really reinforce that.
Mhm.
So once a client does work with us, we see them once a year for free.
Okay.
We review everything. We schedule the appointment
So you
at the
actually
year before.
will call up and say, hey, last year you came in and met with us. We set an appointment for next week. I just want to remind you, you're going to come in and we're going to review again.
Right,
And it's not going to cost you anything to do it.
right,
And you're covered.
right.
Wow, that's some protection.
We want to
That
make
is-
sure that we understand that the documents we do now are for the future.
Right.
We want to make sure they're going to work properly and that things are done right. So when you come in and sign documents in my office, as you're leaving, you're making an appointment for a year later for a review. Same day, same time.
Right.
And sometimes obviously they get rescheduled, but
Unless it's on a Sunday, right?
well, we don't do anything on Sunday.
Because we don't work on Sundays.
We don't
right?
work on Sundays.
That's most of, how often, and this is something that I want to, how often do you have a situation where you have to set people up or, I guess a better way to look at this is because I've had friends who've had this situation where their spouse or their better half or, have gotten ill and needed long-term care, and it ate up all their assets,
Right,
okay? And they were left with nothing,
right,
right?
right.
Is there a way to protect yourself from that?
Absolutely. So I would say probably one of our strongest features in our office is being good at that.
Okay.
Advanced planning is, I guess there are levels, right? So the person that's done advanced planning, where they've come in and they've done the powers of attorney, done the healthcare proxies, maybe done a trust, maybe did
Right.
some whatever, they're putting themselves in the best light as compared to the person that's done nothing, right?
Right.
The person that has done nothing is going to have a hard time protecting their assets and getting the care they want.
So why is it important to put assets into trust, and when should you do that? At what time of your life?
Okay, so
Well, take me as an example.
right.
All right, so let's work with it, right?
Right.
I'm 29,
Got
plus,
it.
plus 24 years.
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm in my early 50s. I don't have a trust set up, okay? Right now I'm in good health, but who knows when and how that may change.
Right.
I have assets that I want to protect. So, how would I do that? Now, people talk about trusts, and, there's all different types of trusts. It's like everything else in
Right.
when you talk about legal terms. You got blind trusts, you got irrevocable trusts, revocable trusts. What's the difference
Testamentary trust.
Testamentary. What's a testamentary trust?
Okay.
You know?
So a trust is a tool
Okay.
that the draftsman uses to manage assets and create situations, protect situations. So you start out with a fundamental definition of a trust, and that's a relationship between somebody that's a trustee,
Okay.
that the person creating the trust trusts. It could be done in a will, that's a testamentary trust.
Okay.
So many people have wills that say, my kids are minors, and, if I die, I want it held in trust until they're, 80 years old, right?
Right.
Just kidding, of
Yeah.
course. But, so that's a testamentary trust. It comes to life when the person dies.
Mm-hmm.
That is not going to protect assets. It's not going to avoid probate. It actually has to be probated in order for it to have effect.
Okay.
Versus today, the common conversation about trusts that everybody's talking about is a living trust, and they can be either revocable or irrevocable.
Okay. So what's the difference between a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust?
Okay, so a revocable trust, the person creating it can revoke, amend, change it at any time.
Okay.
The benefits of that is asset management and avoids probate. They're great tools if you have multiple pieces of real estate, especially if in multiple states.
Right.
Because if you have those assets in your name alone, it goes back to probating. And if there's multiple states with multiple real estate, now you're probating the will in multiple states.
Right.
So revocable trusts are great for that. And they're also great for asset management on disability. The world we're in today does not like powers of attorney.
Okay.
Everybody has to have them.
Right.
You don't have to have them, but everybody should have them. But the world doesn't really like them. By placing assets into a revocable trust, it makes it much easier to access those assets when somebody becomes disabled.
Right, okay.
So that's a revocable trust. No asset protection planning in a revocable trust. It's
Right.
an asset management tool.
Okay.
You can put features into the trust for beneficiaries. So
Mhm.
if I have a revocable trust that I have funded and I have a special needs child and I want to leave assets for them, I can leave it in a special needs trust for them inside the revocable trust.
I got you.
Okay. Which is a great concept because now you're avoiding probate,
Right.
which probating a will with a special needs child involved gets complicated very quickly.
And why does it get complicated? Because the child is a special needs child as compared to having a child that's not.
So depending on the special needs child's disability, if they can't intellectually understand the nature of a proceeding, then the court, in order to be able to probate the will, has to appoint a guardian ad litem for that individual.
Okay, so but if I, in my revocable trust, I name a trustee,
Then we don't have a court, we don't have an appointment.
so you don't have any of that
We don't
stuff.
have any of that.
So it's important to actually name a trustee as part of these trusts when you're setting them up.
Absolutely,
Okay,
yeah. Name a trust and beneficiaries.
okay.
Irrevocable trust is a little different,
Mm-hmm.
right? Irrevocable trust is someplace we place assets that we want to have asset protection over, that might look like a gift.
Right, okay.
So in the tax world, we use irrevocable trusts typically to own life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize that the death benefit on a life insurance policy is part of a taxable estate.
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a $2 million life insurance policy and I have a $4 million New York estate, right? Retirement plan, house, artwork,
You gotta add
whatever.
that 2 to that 4 and
Yeah.
you're over the limit.
You're over
Yep.
the limit, and you're hit with a tax. So a life insurance trust could own the insurance,
Mhm.
and now you could pass that $6 million to the family without that tax.
Right,
So that's significant. In the government benefits area or long-term care area, we use a particular kind of irrevocable trust where the person that sets it up retains enough rights and control so that they're comfortable.
right.
For tax reasons, that trust does not exist. So it doesn't file its own tax return, doesn't use its own social security number. But for Medicaid purposes or government benefits purposes, it's not considered owned anymore,
So if I become ill,
right?
say I have an irrevocable trust, and I have, we'll say $1 million in my trust, okay? It's off to the side, it's an irrevocable trust, I'm not the trustee anymore, so it's not even considered my money anymore. Is that what you're saying?
For Medicaid purposes.
For Medicaid purposes, so
Right.
I can then go to Medicaid and say, I need long-term care, you can't eat up my $1 million
Right,
in doing that.
Right.
Because for those who don't know, Medicaid, when you get Medicaid benefits, they look to get paid back the money that they pretty much lay out
Right.
based on what assets you have. And
Well-
correct me if I'm misstating that.
so on the upfront side, if you don't meet, excuse me, certain financial criteria, you wouldn't be eligible.
Right.
On the back end side, there is something called recovery. So people commonly think of their house as an exempt asset in New York.
Right.
I can go on Medicaid and have a house. As long as you're living in the house, the answer is yeah. If you're in a nursing home, it's not an exempt house.
Right.
If you're living in the house receiving care at home and you die, Medicaid can recover against the house. So,
So they can put a lien against the house, so now when you sell the house, or your estate sells the house,
well, they're not leaning it because while you're living in it, they can't touch it.
well, if you pass,
Then they can put a claim against your estate.
right, so they put a claim against your estate, now your beneficiaries or your.
Is the state.
His estate now has to pay back whatever value Medicaid is looking for.
Right. That's
So
right.
that could be very significant. That could wipe out the whole estate,
Absolutely.
especially for a lot of people out there that, are that middle-class family that they don't have tons of assets. They don't have millions of dollars stashed away.
And although the inheritance part is important and the asset protection part is important, we also are doing this planning so that we're protecting the individual themselves. The government doesn't pay for everything.
Right.
And at a nursing home cost of $20,000 a month, home care at $250 to $500 a day, we're structuring things in a way so that we can maximize government benefits and still have assets available to pay for the things the government doesn't pay for.
Right.
We're in a very scary time with this new home care ruling that just came out, where we talked about before, they're doubling the cost of home care.
And that goes to what we were just talking about. If now these people have to be paid for 24 hours for these live-in, home health care aids,
Right.
That's going to blow that cost up significantly. So even if you had enough assets for recovery,
Right.
it's going to eat up even more if
Right.
Medicaid is going to be participate in this.
Right.
Because we don't even know if Medicaid's going to participate
Right.
in this 24-hour thing that the state Supreme Court has just come out with.
Right, and the other scary part about that is it has a 6-year look back. So there's a 6-year statute of limitations. So if an aide has worked in the house as a live-in aide.
So if I'm a home health care aide, and for you home health care aides that are watching tonight, you can go back and claim back to the last 6 years of work and claim 24 hours.
It's not a finalized.
It's not finalized right now. We all know it's going to change.
This is the issue, though.
It's the issue, right?
So the case is on appeal. The Court of Appeals will probably decide it January, February, March, something. Department of Labor, the government is focused on it. They know it's a significant issue, but there's a big exposure.
Could bankrupt a lot of companies.
Yeah. Yeah.
If all of a sudden I was paying all these employees thinking this is how much I have to charge in order to, and now all of a sudden I got to go back and pay these people for money I never collected a charge.
6 years back.
6 years back.
Yeah, it's going to put everybody out of business.
It'll devastate.
There'll be no home care in New York.
Yeah.
That's
So
really what it'll come
basically what it'll be is you'll have to go to these
A nursing home.
nursing
or
home
assisted
or anything
living.
like that, assisted living and that.
Right.
Now, with the assisted living facilities in favor of this happening?
I don't think anybody's in favor of it
Okay.
at the end of the day.
At the end of the
The
day,
the labor force is in favor of it,
of course, yeah.
but now they're going to be unemployed.
Right.
So where did that really end up?
Well, it's kind of like raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, right? So, before when you walked into McDonald's, you had a whole bunch of kids behind the counter. Now when you walk into McDonald's, you have a kiosk,
Right.
right?
Right,
So
there you
it's
go.
like all of
Right.
these kids are gone,
Right.
and now you got a kiosk. You put your order in, you pay there, and you wait for your order to come out.
Well,
You
it's
know?
funny because in the same industry, not long ago, home care workers were exempt from time and a half.
Right.
So if they worked
remember that,
60 hours, they were paid for 60 hours. It wasn't time and a half.
Right.
So that law changed.
Mm-hmm.
So what the home care agencies did was instead of paying time and a half and keeping the aide on for 60 hours, they brought in 3 different aides.
Right.
So they didn't have to pay the time and a half.
Right.
So now the home care market's even more stretched because we don't have the labor force to fill it.
Right.
And the home care worker that was getting paid for the 60 hours now is only getting 39 hours and have
Yeah.
to scramble with multiple families. And so I don't know that it's worked out well for them.
Right. Well, and again, that's the thing is, how do you keep things affordable when you keep bumping up the cost of it?
Right.
And what people don't see is, I'm going to get $15 an hour now when they were getting 10.
Right.
And well, somebody's got to pay for it.
Right.
It's got to come out of somebody's pocket, and most businesses can't raise prices that much
Right.
in order to cover it,
Right.
It's-
It's a problem, and I'm glad I'm not the one that has to try to figure out how to resolve it.
Me too.
Right?
Me too.
So my job really is to try to share this with clients
Mm-hmm.
and help clients figure out how they're going to deal with the situation.
Right.
Another very important change is about to come into effect. The VA just issued regulations changing something called aid and attendance.
Okay, so what is aid and attendance?
So there's a veterans benefit where veterans can get a pension, and if they're homebound or they're receiving care that exceeds their income, cost of care exceeds their income,
Right.
they can apply to the VA for an aid and attendance benefit.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Well, that means they can get a payment of somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 a month to help their cost.
Okay.
A lot of people in assisted living facilities, veterans, apply for this and are awarded it.
Okay.
The VA just changed the rules so that Like Medicaid, where Medicaid has a 5-year look back, the aid and attendance program is now going to have a 3-year look back. So if you had assets and transferred them
Right.
with the intent of going on receiving aid and attendance, prior to this rule, you could transfer them today and the next month you could be eligible.
Right, I got you.
Under this new rule, there's going to be a 3-year look back with, I think, a 5-year penalty.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Right? For those of you who don't know what a look back is, explain, I'm going now for Medicaid.
Okay,
All right. I am telling them I cannot afford it. I can't afford my health care. I don't have any assets, even though I have this irrevocable trust over here,
right.
right, with my assets in it. I can't afford any of this. Tell us the process they go through to determine if you're now eligible for Medicaid.
Okay. So the local county will do a 100% audit of your financial information for the 5 years prior to you applying
Okay, so they go back 5 years.
for nursing home or institutional care.
Okay,
And that comes up in two places. One, somebody's received more than 29 days of institutional rehabilitative care
okay,
and has stayed in an institution for rehab longer. Could be 3 months, and maybe Medicare paid for part of it and didn't have a supplement policy, and now they've got a $200 a day bill.
right,
Or it could be somebody that's permanently placed in a nursing home. That's typically where you see it. So from the time you apply and you're in that facility, they go back 5 years. They want to see all bank records, financial records. They're looking to see if you've given away assets or if you have hidden assets.
okay,
And we can spend an hour talking about annuities.
right.
'Cause
But we want to talk about that.
Okay.
So let's keep it simple because we don't have a lot of time to talk about that stuff.
Right.
And we could, like you said, we could spend hours on it. So here's the situation. I'll throw a situation out at you.
Okay.
I created this irrevocable trust 3.5 years ago. Okay, didn't give it away. We just moved into it. We created a trust. We moved it over. The money's now over there. It's sitting there. I no longer have it. It's 3.5 years gone. I'm now very ill, and I need to apply for Medicaid.
Okay.
So Medicaid now looks back and says, "Wait a second. 3.5 years ago, you had $1 million. What happened to it?"
Right.
Well, it was put into this trust. What do they do?
Okay, so great question. I'm going to add a question to the mix.
Okay.
And so the question is, can I stay at home for another 1.5 2 years? If I can stay at home with care, if we don't have a 24-hour problem, right?
Right.
If I can stay at home with care, I can apply for community Medicaid,
Okay.
which doesn't have a 5-year look back,
All right.
and I can get care at home and have the government help me pay for that. If I can't stay at home, then what Medicaid does, if I'm in a nursing home, institutionalized, and they look back and they find this transfer,
Right.
they'll make you ineligible to the value of the transfer. So, it gets a little bit complicated.
Okay.
We go back 5 years to look for transfers, but then we calculate a transfer going forward. So if we put, let's use a different number. Let's say we put 300,000 into a trust, a
Okay.
house. Let's say it's a house, it went into a trust. If I'm in a 5-year look back in Medicaid, and I'm applying for Medicaid, Medicaid should be told that I made this transfer.
Right.
They're going to look at it and they're going to say, well, the $300,000 transfer is going to result in a 40-month ineligibility period from the date you apply forward. So you need to reconsider, are you going to apply or are you going to employ some other course of action?
Right. Okay.
So a lot of times what we do is when we're planning and we're setting up these
I was going
trusts.
to say, how do we get around that, and how do we protect ourselves from that?
So when you're setting up these trusts and you're doing the planning, you kind of have to look at the client and the individual and the family and say, all right, is this person likely going to need nursing home care in the next 5 years?
Right.
If they are, you have to anticipate that the 5-year window, you might make transfers and that 5-year window might need to be covered. So
Right.
sometimes we'll do multiple trusts, knowing that we may not make 5 years.
Right.
And we're going to have to restructure. And so if I have more than one trust, I don't have to take the whole plan apart. Maybe I
Okay.
can take one trust apart.
I got
And
you.
in New York, even though a trust is irrevocable, you can still revoke it.
You can still, even though it says irrevocable, you
Right,
can still
still
revoke it.
revoke
Okay, so I think I got the gist of this now,
Okay.
right? If I put money into a trust, or I put a house into a trust, or whatever, and 4 years down the road, I'm 48. And correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to get the flow of this thing.
Yeah,
4 years down the road, something happens where now I need to be in a nursing home. They're going to go back 5 years. They're going to
Right.
see that 4 years ago I transferred this trust.
right.
Okay? So now I'm excluded for the next 4 years
Yes, if you apply for Medicaid.
if I apply for Medicaid. So they go back and go, okay, it was 4 years ago. Now, just because of that, you are not eligible for Medicaid for another 4 years.
Right, so,
Okay?
right, so exactly. So you don't want to apply for
So
Medicaid at
it's
that
not
point.
like a year, because we only got a year to go.
Right,
It's not like you're not eligible for another year.
right,
No, you're excluded for another 4 years.
exactly.
Wow.
So you got to be it's another very good point you bring out. You don't want to apply for Medicaid at that point.
Right.
You want to wait until the 5 years has run
Mm-hmm.
and then apply.
Right.
Now that transfer will be outside the look back.
Yeah.
So, but then the question becomes, how are you going to pay for your care?
Well, and that's what I mean.
Right.
God forbid, you're in a car accident or something like that.
Right.
And it's so serious that now you have to.
So we build these boxes so they can be accessed.
Okay.
So usually what we do is if a client doesn't make the 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
we have a choice. Either we can revoke the trust or revoke one of the trusts that we've set up
Mm-hmm.
and use that money to pay for care while protecting the rest.
Right.
Or we can actually distribute funds from the trust.
Mm-hmm.
We put in provisions in the trust that allow money to be distributed.
For care.
Not for care, because if
Okay.
it's distributable for care, it's not a protected asset.
I
Medicaid
gotcha.
counts it available. So we have mechanisms in place that allow it to be distributed.
Right.
I'm sorry. So, okay. Allow it to be distributed so that it can be accessed, so that we can get past the 5 year window, pay for the care, and protect the rest of the trust.
Right.
But you got to be careful. Just like the fact pattern that we see frequently now, where a client will think they're doing the right thing, a son or a daughter, and take assets out of their parents' name.
Right.
They're in assisted living, mom and dad's got a couple $100,000. Let's take it out of their name, put it in our name, because that'll start the look back.
Right.
And we'll pay for the assisted living.
Yeah.
And then something happens where the parent now needs to go to a nursing home, and they've spent all the money.
Right. Okay.
So a number of years ago, there was an appellate division court case that said unless you give that money back to the parent and they pay for their care, it's not considered a return. So you take $300,000 out of the person's name,
Mm-hmm.
you spend it all on their care. 3 years later, you need to apply for Medicaid for them in a nursing home.
It doesn't count.
It doesn't count. The Medicaid will hit you with a $300,000 ineligibility period.
Right.
And where are you going to get the money to pay for care?
Yeah.
So
You got to sell the house.
you got to sell a house.
So- It's a slippery slope.
It is. You got to
Well,
be very careful.
isn't one way to protect yourself is to get, you see these commercials everywhere, these long-term care insurance commercials,
Right.
where you can get insurance for long-term care,
Right.
if you have to go into nursing home and things like that. Now, if you have that and you still can't pay for the long-term care, because the insurance doesn't cover all of it, you may have a very poor policy, and you need to now apply for Medicaid,
Right.
that whole 5 year look back is still,
It's still part of it.
it's still part of the whole thing.
Unless you bought well, even if you bought a partnership policy, I guess you'd end up in the same place.
Right.
There's a lot of different variations on a theme today when it comes to long-term care insurance. So that's a product, kind of like life insurance, that
Mhm.
you should really buy with a qualified financial advisor.
Right.
And it should be looked at yearly, because your point is well taken. We see cases that come in that people have bought policies, that
Mhm.
paid premiums over the years, that are insufficient.
And you help your clients, you point them in the right direction with this type of stuff,
Right,
right?
yeah.
So you point them to the right financial advisor and bring those people together.
And we monitor what's being done.
And you watch what's going on.
Right.
Right? So
Right.
David, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you,
Right.
right, to talk about this,
Okay,
all right, and like I said, I told you our time is gonna fly here.
right.
And we're coming to the end now.
Right.
But before we do that, why don't you tell everybody how they can get a hold of you?
Okay.
So go right ahead.
So my office phone number is 631-427-4600. If you call that, it's likely that you'll speak to Beth in my office, who's lovely and been with me over 18 years. Very informative, and we'll try to answer any questions you have. We have offices in Huntington, Setauket, and West Hampton, and we see clients from all over New York State. So
Okay.
it's 631-427-4600.
Well, I want to say, David, that this information tonight, like I said, it just, the time flew.
It did.
And it flew because it was very good information. And it was, I think, gave our viewers a very good taste of what's out there and what they need to prepare for. You know, we're always talking about being prepared, planning out, having your ducks in a row, you know, and this is part of it. You know, as we get older, and, you know, we're all getting there,
Right.
we need to be ready for that.
Right.
And it doesn't matter how young you are, because I can tell you this, if I can go back 30 years and redo all of these things we just talked about, I would do it in a heartbeat, because when I was younger, I was like, I don't have to worry about that now. I kept
Right.
putting it off. And then when, you know, it's time to do it, you're like, oh my God, you know, it's.
Wish I had done this
I
already.
wish I had done this already.
Yeah, I can't tell you how
So-
many times I hear that a week, right?
Yeah. So, David, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then, you know, you got some interesting things going on in your life. You know, with your family and stuff. You don't mind me bringing up your boys.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
You know,
It's,
so David's proud papa of triplets.
Yeah.
Right. They all just started college.
right, freshman in college.
Freshman in college now.
Right.
So you had a very busy summer.
Very busy summer and a busy fall.
Right.
So I for the first time, we've been separated because they're all at different schools.
Right.
Well, one of them's home with me.
Okay.
But they're at different schools, and we've been traveling to see them, and they're doing great.
So how has that separation been? You know, you
I
have
think
triplets.
for me, it's challenging. I think
Yeah.
they're happy I'm away. You know, they're away
Right,
from me, right?
right.
So,
Well, we were all young, right? When we went to college, we were like, yeah, we're out, we're
That's
gone.
it,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're our
yeah.
own people now, type of thing.
yeah,
But you know, I know you went to school on the island. I went to school on the island,
Right.
so it wasn't like we really went away.
right.
I mean, you got a boy in Georgetown, you got a boy at Northwestern, right?
Northeastern.
Northeastern. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Uh,
He'll get upset if you say that.
and one, like you said, it's living at home and going to school locally.
Right.
So it's got to be a weird dynamic now, not having three in the house and only having one.
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different. But you know, we're not running. We're not going
Right.
to the music festivals and to the
Yeah.
art shows and things of that. But we're visiting and we're talking to them, and so it's a nice part of life.
Right.
But it's a little empty.
Yeah.
So I feel bad for the one that's home because he gets all the attention now.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
And so
You feel bad for him.
I feel bad for him, you know.
Because he's like, hey, what are you doing? You know,
right.
Leave me alone.
Right.
But it was different. Like when we went away to college, we didn't have that. We didn't have what we have today, where you can pick up the phone and just do FaceTime or whatever,
Right.
and you can see them.
Right.
Right. We didn't see
text them
or text them
or-
and stuff
right,
like that.
right.
We had payphones at the end of the hall that we had to go to
Right.
and make the calls home. You know,
Right.
and not everybody was home at the time because we
Right.
didn't have cell phones back then. So
So we're fortunate that we can do that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're involved in that you want to talk about? Any charities or anything like that? You got anything coming up that you want to announce?
I don't think we have anything currently of interest
Mhm.
to announce at this point. I'm involved in a lot of different things constantly, you know.
Right.
I sit on the exec committee of the New York State Bar Elder Law Section. I co-chair the Elder Law Committee for the Suffolk County Bar currently. And that's kind of keeping me busy.
Well, yeah, I mean,
with
in here,
that.
you also talked about being a speaker, and you go out and speak on these topics and things like that. So if people wanted to get a hold of you to have you come down and speak,
Right.
they can do that too,
They
right?
absolutely.
All
call the
right, so
office.
one more time, give them how
Okay.
they can get a hold of you.
So the office phone number is 631-427-4600. I look forward to hearing from all the viewers. You can call the office to make an appointment. If you have a group that you would like to have a speaker come out, we can arrange for that, where I'll come out and speak to your group about any topic in the elder law, estate planning, special needs area. Be happy to.
All right, fantastic. Well, David, it's been an absolute pleasure having
you.
you on the show tonight.
Me too.
All right,
Thank you.
for being on.
My pleasure.
Okay, and we'll talk to you soon. All right, everybody. I want to thank you again for tuning in tonight. We had a really great show. Next week is going to be another good show. So don't forget, tune in next Wednesday night, 8 p.m., Twitch TV, Facebook Live, Area 22 Productions. All right, and thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody. Today's show is brought to you by Friend Entertainment USA, producing the best concerts for charities and corporations for over 30 years. And CBMS Consulting Services. Control your business before it controls you. In association with Area 22 Productions, your multimedia streaming network. If you're interested in being a guest on our show, visit our website at www.bphdmm.com for more information.